privilegio en este 22 de febrero de 2021 iniciar esta reunión de ministros.
To start this meeting of ministers of education of ALBA-TCP. It is a privilege for me to have amongst us, on the first place, our comrade Aristóbulo Istúriz Almeida, Vice President of Social and Territorial Development and Minister of People's Power for Education of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Also, we have here with us in Caracas, our friend César Trompis, Minister of People's Power for University Education. We are also accompanied by our comrade Marianela Vargas, Vice Minister for the qualitative transformation of university education of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Likewise, we have the presence of Nancy Ortuño, Vice Minister of Education as well of Venezuela, Daniela Rodriguez, Vice Minister for Multilateral Matters of Venezuela. We have a very renowned person here, Raul Licausi, who is the president of the BANALBA. And through the different screens, I would like to salute Elsa Velázquez Coviella, the Minister of Education of the Republic of Cuba. Our friend José Ramón Saborido Coidil, Minister of Higher Education of our sisterly nation of Cuba. We send you a warm greeting to Cuba. We also have the presence of Adrián Rubén Kelke, Minister of Education of the plurinational state of Bolivia. We send you our warmest hug to our dear friend from Bolivia. We would like to salute as well the Minister of Education of the Republic of Nicaragua, Miriam Soledad Raudes Rodriguez. It is a pleasure to greet you from here, from Caracas. I would like to underscore the initiative of Nicaragua to move forward this important meeting.
Sports and Industries of Antigua and Barbuda. Also, the Minister of Education of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Curtis Key. Welcome, Excellency. Thank you very much for being with us. The Minister of Education of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, Donald Powell, is also with us. Emmeline Pierre, Minister of Education, Human Resources Development, Religious Affairs and Information from Grenada is also joining us. And from the Commonwealth of Dominica, Chandler Hyacinth, Permanent Secretary of Education, Human Resource Planning, Vocational Training and National Excellence. Hoy tenemos la
Today, we have the opportunity to continue with the plan that was approved by the heads of states and government during the last summit held on December the 14th for the post-pandemic plan. It is a work plan which contains as one of the main topics the relaunching of the social agenda of ALBA-TCP to revitalize its working agencies and to strengthen the development model from a social, collective, solidary, and popular point of view. In that sense, this is a joint work with the different delegations, and we've proposed an agenda that is quite valuable. I will only point out several aspects of the agenda, and later on, I will give the floor to Aristóbulo Istúriz for him to officially begin this meeting. As I was saying, amongst the topic of the agenda, we have education in times of COVID, lessons learned, challenges and perspectives to offer a good quality education, the presentation of the countries regarding national strategies and plans implemented to guarantee the academic continuance of all different levels and modalities during the pandemic, the challenges of education, mainly of the in-person model, the teleclasses, the online classes, and the combination of all the models in order to confront the pandemic. The good practices of education, the learning of languages from the elementary school in the public system, the literacy and educational continuity, the challenges and perspectives specifically in higher education in the times of COVID. The universities with academic offers for the city and for the field. The online university, education based on information technology, information and communication technology, the virtual learning and the development of contents. Likewise, education for the permanent training of teachers and professors, the inclusive education, the development of technical and vocational education, the School of Arts of the different municipalities, the orchestras and choirs for music education, the multilingual education and multicultural educations. These are some of the topics we are going to discuss today with the different ministers of education of ALBA-TCP. I am totally convinced that you all agree with me on the fact that on this topic and on other topics, we must be deeply proud of what ALBA-TCP has provided in terms of education, not only for the member states of ALBA, but also beyond the borders of our Bolivarian alliance. Here I have several figures that I believe are important. Just in terms of literacy, we have managed to educate 3,815,000 people. Almost 4 million people have been educated on literacy through the different programs that ALBA or the member states of ALBA make available to our people. In terms of post-literacy, 1,174,300 people completed their elementary education. That is another figure that has to be highlighted. Furthermore, in terms of university education at the ELAM, 1,469 holistic physicians have graduated. More than 22,000 integral physicians have graduated both in Cuba and Venezuela. And more than 1,500 people have graduated from the postgraduate programs. And during the past few years, we have been able to declare free from literacy countries such as Antigua and Barbuda, Bolivia, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. These are progresses that are absolutely crucial and that become an example for the rest of the world. I now have the privilege to give the floor to our friend Aristóbulo Isturiz Almeida, who is the Vice President of Social Development and Territorial Development, as well as Minister of People's Power for Education of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. It is a privilege to count with your presence on this occasion. We now give you the floor. Thank you. Dear Sasha Lorenti, Executive Secretary of ALBA, Raúl Licausi, President of BANALBA, Daniela Rodriguez, who is our Vice Minister for Multilateral Matters, Cesar Trompis, and the Vice Minister. On behalf of the Bolivarian government of Venezuela and on behalf of our President Nicolás Maduro, I would like to salute you and to warmly welcome each and every one of the compatriots and ministers of education of the countries of ALBA. I believe that one day like today is quite important. It is crucial to begin this meeting and to remember why we are here. The creation of the ALBA responding to a need that our peoples had, the need to promote international policies within the framework of sisterhood, solidarity, equity, social justice for the construction of a multi-plural world characterized by complementarity and respect for sovereignty and self-determination of people. The idea of ALBA was born in 2001 in a summit of heads of states and government of the Alliance of the Associations of States of the Caribbean in Margarita. And it was completed or concreted in 2004 by our two giants of our continents, that is, Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro. In that strategic alliance between Cuba and Venezuela, within the framework of that alliance, we concluded the birth of ALBA, which then was integrated by other countries. It was initiated thinking in the fight against poverty, social exclusion, lack of literacy, the defense of human rights and labor rights, the rights of women, of the environment. And in the latest summit of heads of states, like the secretary said, which was held on December 14 of 2020, when we commemorated the 16th anniversary of the organization, we agreed on a post-pandemic work plan for 2021, which commit all the governments and peoples that are members of the organization. The social area, as all other areas, is included in the plan. We agreed on relaunching the social agenda. The secretary already mentioned which were the main guidelines of the same. We are here fulfilling that duty. The ministers of education of the country of ALBA, affected by the pandemic that is now attacking humanity. We are all here today. But as a Venezuelan citizen, I would like to tell you, brothers and sisters, that our people today is also affected by another pandemic, which is the imperialist offensive that is permanent and that is translated into a brutal economic war, a criminal blockade, and unilateral coercive measures that are unlawful and that violate international law. This is done in order to make our people kowtow, in order to get power of our wealth. Venezuela has been an example of resistance. Today, we can say with pride that amidst the pandemic, that amidst the economic warfare, amidst the blockade and the sanctions, we have our homeland. In 2021, when we commemorate 200 years of the Battle of Carabobo, which gave our independence. By the way, Chavez insisted a lot on this date as a milestone, where our people assumed a libertarian spirit. Today, we must culminate the total defense of our people. This meeting forms part of that duty, of that task. We were all surprised by the pandemic. We assumed education. We assumed the distant education to guarantee the right to life in harmony with the right to education. It is a program that is called Each Family, One School. That program allows us to activate a trilogy between the family, the school, and the community, making use of the different communication platforms and a diversity of pedagogical strategies. Some of them are based on the common aspect that is beyond the technology, in order to guarantee the permanence and the continuation of the presence of our boys and girls. The Patria technological platform is also used. By this, we were able to complete the school year of 2019-2020 and the beginning of the school year 2020-2021. We've completed the first term, September, December, and we are now right in the middle of the second term, which is from January to March. During this period, we carried out seminars with the participation of UNICEF and UNESCO, with the invitation of certain sisterly nations to study the compared education. We had 3 important seminars. One of them was the distant, remote education. Here we have all the conclusions of that seminar and we can share them with all of you. Another important seminar that was held was the educational TV channel. We also collected all the conclusions and learning lessons and all the matters that have to do with the psychosocial and psycho-emotional impacts of the quarantine on our boys and girls. We closed the year by carrying out the National Pedagogical Congress, a congress that has been held every year to systematize the experiences in the remote learning modality. We began with success the school year 2020, and we completed the first pedagogical year. We completed all these strategies during the flexibilization week. Our president has established one method that is called 7+7. During 1 week, we have a flexibilization, and the next week, we have a quarantine. In that sense, during the flexibilization week, we include almost the semi-in-person attendance of students. So parents and students can go to schools and clarify any doubts they might have. And this is done at all levels of the educational system. So we have those advisory meetings during the flexibilization weeks. We systematized the assistance in this book that is called Education, based on common aspects. When we talk about pedagogical strategies, I mean that the technology in our country, as in many of our countries, do not reach all the corners of the country. That is why it is necessary to consider initiatives that have to do with the site, with the history, with the identity of the different regions. Every region had their different pedagogical strategy, not technological strategy. They collected all the notebooks and the works of the students, and this was done everywhere, even in the Amazonas, where the notebooks of the children, of the indigenous children, were also collected. All of that was collected, was discussed, and shared with some countries. And we published this book later on. So the whole pedagogical chart is here. And by the way, we used all the pedagogical media. We used the social media, we used the digital library, all our bicentennial collection, all the books are digitalized. And all our planning is launched on Fridays through the printed media, so parents can have this information at home. We then had a crisis of paper, and well, we are issuing it every 2 months. It includes all the activities and all the purposes, all the duties and the homeworks that the children have to do every day. And we are publishing it every 2 months due to the problem with the paper. Nevertheless, we have never stopped making efforts in a program that is key for us, which is called the Scientific Seed Plan, or Semillero Científico in Spanish. We already published the first scientific magazine. Here you can see all the works performed by the boys and the girls. We also have a book on mathematics. We have the Expo Productive Pedagogy. We have the publications of all the works that are carried out by our youngsters and by our professors. At present times, we are considering going back to school, having the children going back to school, and there's a whole debate in the country. The president has said that the classes should begin in March. We are proposing some alternatives. We also incorporated the in-person evaluation. And we are getting ready for the post-pandemic period. And the ALBA has invited us to reflect on this and to share this. We would like to say that during the post-pandemic, the first thing we must consider is how can children go back to in-person school in a safe manner? We said that it has to be done in a progressive manner, and we have some plans that are being discussed. Secondly, to systematize the experiences and the learnings of the education during the pandemic. We did not have experiences with teleclasses. Professors were not ready. We didn't have educational TV channel. Nowadays, we have a whole accumulated experience, which is quite important. What are the challenges of the post-pandemic education? What did the schools learn? How do schools should look like? What is the transformation they must go through? Professors, do they have to have the same training? Do their training imply changes? In our pedagogical university, we are carrying out plans from the curriculum point of view, which can be translated into the permanent training as well as on the initial training of professors, families, and communities, with the new ways to interrelate with the school after the pandemic, and all that have to do with the need to socialize, to universalize the technology. For example, in the internet, we're carrying out a great, huge effort because we don't have internet everywhere. This is a change that we're going to do. Also, the teachers, the boys and the girls, we have to include all the elements that have to do with technology. Thank you very much for listening to my reflections, and I hope I can hear your comments. Thank you very much. Thank you, our friend Vice President. You are completely right. We have a homeland, and we have a huge homeland. Next, I would like to give the floor to our colleague Cesar Trumpis, who is Minister of Popular Power for University Education of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you very much. With your permission, I will take my mask off. First of all, I would like to salute the Executive Secretary of the ALBA, Mr. Sasha Sergio Lorenti Solis, our Vice President and Minister of Education, the Vice Ministers who are also here today, as well as all the ministers of this meeting of the Educational ALBA. Dear delegates and authorities of the ALBA-TCP, on behalf of the Bolivarian government of Venezuela, thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate in this meeting of the ALBA-TCP, which is a space where we can talk about the topics of the Grand National Program ALBA Educación to revitalize the scheme and to confront the effects generated by the COVID-19 pandemics. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, with its president, decreed as one of the first measures to prevent the propagation of the COVID-19, the suspension of the academic activities nationwide. This was accompanied by a series of instructions and recommendations to ensure the continuity of the pedagogical processes at all levels and educational subsystems, as we have heard in the exposition of our Vice President Isturiz. Our efforts should be oriented to having a platform that will provide a good quality education to everyone. This concern to ensure the access and continuity of studies within the framework of the pandemic made us reaffirm education as a fundamental human right of our people and to work in an accelerated manner for the reinvention of the university model, both inside and outside the claustrum. This is a process that has been sped up by the COVID-19. The pandemic is not the only threat. There are other threats. And that is what we said in Havana in the meetings of university ministers of last year. During this time, we have designed and we decreed the state of emergency, and we designed the emergency plan of homeschooling to attack the pandemic and to look for new alternatives that will allow reinvention of the educational system. Within the framework of this plan, we have developed different activities. With university institutions, we want to emphasize the commitment of all the actors in order to carry out this massive.
The role of the students means the right of education. The distance education for pre and postgraduate students have been conducted on more than 3 million students in all the university institutions, both private and public, in the framework of the homeschooling project. We have the University Council anti-COVID at the ministerial level, and the anti-COVID councils were created, and voluntary brigades where we have the medical students. 25,000 of them are part of the public health care institutions. Also, university at home through radio programs, social networks, TV, 54 TV programs associated to curriculum units with the initiation program, more than 80,000 students. And Venezuela, in order to strengthen the relation between teachers and students, and based on decisions by the president, have given 86,000 tablets to teachers of the university public institutions. Also, the repository of information where universities can share information during the COVID pandemic, and they have available the academic efforts performed by the various university institutions in the country. Also, we need to highlight that our country, as mentioned, we have 1 week of flexibilization and 1 week of lockdown. So we have authorized the use of the flexible week for experimental areas, laboratories, internships, in order to foster university education. In April 2020, the national system of university opportunities in Venezuela took place through a social and political effort of university students, teachers, and authorities. And we went home by home, new bachelors to enter university. So a large number of new students entered university level. And this despite the UCM and the attacks by the US and its allies, affecting the possibility to acquire inputs, meet our needs, and limit the implementation of cooperation in education areas to give more solution to the educational system. These aggressions materialized through measures that have an impact on university education. Among them, I would like to highlight the closing of the bank account of the Yacucha Foundation in Societe Generale. This affected the education abroad of our students, and the cooperation program of international students of Venezuela focused on ALBA and Africa. Also, the blockade of informatic system of the Simon Rodriguez University, affecting 120,000 students in 2019, and delayed inscription and grade distribution. Also, the USCB and the UCB has been affected. They have been closed. They closed bank accounts of these universities in the US because of the Office of Asset Control of the US. However, we continue to develop new paradigms and inclusion in Venezuela. In 2021, we have approved the system of follow-up and accreditation in order to work in a process of to improve the quality of a university education in Venezuela, and that could be accredited worldwide. The return to classes should have allies in the methodology that we have applied in the pandemic. We need unity of our education with the technology in order to reinvent our universities. On behalf of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and our president, Nicolas Maduro, I send greetings to all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cesar Trompis, for your intervention. I'm going to give the floor to Enaelce Velasco Covieda, Minister of Education of the Republic of Cuba. You have the floor. Thank you very much, dear Secretary. Good afternoon, dear ministers, heads of delegation accompanying us. The pandemic has forced us to develop mechanisms to adapt to a new reality that challenges our systems. They require solutions and that should be innovative to foster solidarity. Given this complex situation, education is more important and its first pillar, the teachers should have new professional competencies to fulfill the demands imposed by the epidemic, especially the pedagogical skills to have a quality education. In Cuba, this disease has been accompanied by aggravation of the international blockade imposed by the US government on our country for more than 60 years. We have implemented a system of management based on science and innovation, favoring comprehensive work among organizations, society, and the government to ensure quality education. We finished the 2019 period and we started 2020, and we continue teaching distant learning and in persons with families, transforming homes into schools, using capacities created in the country and putting at their disposal in a systemic fashion the means and technologies that exist. We have a TV channel, the national coverage, and the Finnish shop that produces informatic resources, ensuring the required content to provide support to the teachers, and the telematic network through an educational webcast with as a repository of the various contents for teachers and researchers of the country. We also have the Center Institute of Pedagogical Sciences with the third improvement of the educational level. Its pillars are to adapt curricula, research lines in science, education science, and others that have been implemented in order to answer to the pandemic. And that's how we have improved actions in the following sectors. Transmission of teleclasses through the TV channel to various students at different levels, including technical and professional education, updating of teaching use of text and other materials, retransmission of teaching activities using a second TV channel with nation coverage, the use of provincial channels for the teaching activities adjusted to the situation of the epidemic in each territory. The programs of TVs have a sign language to include students with special needs. Also, information panels live to clarify any doubts and for evaluation purposes. Applications for PC, in mobiles for families with psychopedagogical support and the use free of cost. The opening of a national service of tutorship on a permanent basis, online, active 24 hours a day to answer the questions of families and students. Free access to the portal to educate platform of the Ministry of Education, where we host the informative resources supporting the current curriculum, including the textbooks. Promotion of spots through the media with messages to education for health during the pandemic and social and emotional support. The use of other alternatives such as the WhatsApp groups among learners, teaching associations, assistance through phone to households and tutors to give orientation and clarify doubts, and people who receive bibliographical requests and send those materials to the households. Preparation of teachers to serve individually the various personal requirements of the students affected by lockdown. This is part of a research which is in progress. There is a video conference system with all the provinces for the follow-up and evaluation of the implementation of the actions devised in order to serve the needs of the population that we monitor on the daily basis. Directives attend various media to inform on the measures implemented and to follow up on their application. This is a valuable opportunity of exchange of experience in order to rethink our systems, teaching policies to respond to the needs of people who are able to meet these and other challenges. Dear colleagues, we have fixed goals based on illiteracy in sister nations of Latin America and the Caribbean. With application of the Cuban method, yes, I can. Venezuela, Bolivia, and Nicaragua declare themselves free of illiteracy with this method. In the current situation, we need to reformulate the goals based on our needs, realities, and potentials, taking up as a premise the exchange of experience and good practices, unity, solidarity among our peoples, cooperation and integration. Cuba reiterates its commitment with the principles and purposes of this organization, as well as its resolution to continue providing our modest cooperation with all the countries, especially with the members of ALBA-TCP. And we appreciate the effort to work in a common front to fight the effect of the pandemic. I'd like to quote the words of our president when he said, only a articulated response can help us overcome the various crises we are confronting today. Thank you very much.
La solidaridad, la cooperación, la integración.
Thank you very much for your kind words. It's going to help us to meet these challenges. I'd like to give the floor to José Ramón Saborido Roide, the Republic of Cuba. Minister, you have the floor. Dear brothers and sisters of the board, the ministers of education and higher education of the ALBA-TCP countries, and delegations present in this meeting. First of all, I convey my warm greetings. We thank the Sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the Bolivarian Alliance of the Peoples of America, Treaty of Commerce Between Peoples, ALBA-TCP, for this initiative, an opportunity to carry out this dialogue. The pandemic, COVID-19, has transformed the way university works. The economic crisis, aggravated by this pandemic, is having a repercussion on the financial capacities for education. Even in our countries, with the political will that give priority to this sector, to implement these policies in the difficult current situation is our major responsibility. Professors, researchers, directives, students have rise to face this challenge. And we have been able to confront it and draw some lessons valid to strengthen the capacity of the professionals of all the various careers, preserving the highest possible level given the current circumstances. In February, in the recent Pedagogical Congress, I presented some ideas. I would like to underline the following. under the leadership of President of the Republic, Miguel Díaz-Canel, to use university science in the management of the activities of the country, especially to confront COVID-19. The intensive use of technologies, platforms, and digital supports for teaching purposes. Transit from a teaching based on learning or to a teaching based on the, lessons, teaching at this in distance, in person, and develop in independent research, to review curricula, ways of evaluation, means and evaluation. ALBA-TCP has strong political basis and concrete results in higher education, enabling the member states to be able to evaluate and implement in their countries the best experiences that are considered feasible. This is one of the advantages of our integration that we cannot ignore. This context enables us to use new technologies. We need to foster the development of virtual exchanges where we expose relevant experiences and good practices to foster human talent and quality education, always oriented to social commitment, scientific and technical quality, and this sense of belonging with our peoples. To go back to the virtual workshops, ALBA Education, to have ideas and proposals and projects in the field of education and to foster creation, promotion, and visibility of the Observatory of the UniAlba with virtual platforms created to this end. These are some ideas that we need to take into account. If you agree with this proposal, we ratify a strategic line of cooperation in the field of higher education that will benefit not only member countries, but also other countries, making reality the principle of solidarity, which is the basis of our international relations. These guidelines will be given to the project of ALBA-TCP. Although it has been affected by the pandemic, many of the goals have been implemented thanks to our support and our endeavor. Dear colleagues, university community in Cuba condemns the attacks, coercive measures, and the intervention in the internal affairs of the countries of the ALBA-TCP. In the midst of this pandemic, there have been aggravation of the blockade against Cuba by the US government. It's the punitive actions, instead of scaring us, reinforce our will to train better and more committed young people with the fate of their country, as established by the organizers of the creators of our organization, Hugo Chavez Frias and Fidel Castro Ruz. We need to have strategic actions to face the pandemic of COVID-19 in the field of higher education. And we need to be guided by the post-pandemic Plan 2021 applied or proposed by the last summit of our heads. In the current conditions, it is of the essence to have unity of action among us in order to face the huge challenges and to attain the noble objective that we have set. The ALBA-TCP countries can continue counting on our modest and disinterested contribution, and we appreciate profoundly the effort to work in a common front to fight the effect of the pandemic. I hope to embrace you next year during the new Congress 2022, where you are always present. Thank you very much. Thank you, brother, for your very kind intervention. I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate Cuba on all the scientific achievements and technical achievements of Cuba. We are following very closely with the vaccine candidates of our dear Cuba. And yesterday, we read a tweet by President Díaz-Canel, who mentioned that Cuba is already producing in large scale the sovereign 2 vaccine. Therefore, this is a source not only of hope, but pride to all the countries of the world. And it has to do with what you said. It has to do with education, training, and investment in the technological and scientific sovereignty. It is also a privilege to give the floor to Adrián Rubén Kelcatarqui, Minister of Education of the plurinational state of Bolivia. You have the floor. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Warm greetings, fraternal and revolutionary greetings from Bolivia, from our constitutional president, Luis Alberto Arce, and myself. I'm very honored to be present here and to have our compatriot Sacha Llorenti among you. I convey greetings to Aristóbulo Isturiz, César Trompis, Enaelsa Velázquez, José Ramón, and all the ministers taking part in this very important event. On behalf of our president, Luis Arce, we want to ratify our commitment with integration and the larger homeland. We greet the heroic people of Cuba that continue resisting the imperial attacks, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, for the effort they have made in the struggle against the imperial onslaught. The same thing with Nicaragua, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and Grenadines, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, and all of you. I would like to begin by saying that in Bolivia, there has been, in November 2019, there was a coup d'etat organized since from the CIA agency that has mobilized ultra-right sectors and ultra-left sectors.
The plan for Bolivia, which was designed by the agency, by the American agency on Bolivia. That coup, that was a very hard blow. We had many people injured, many people died. Also, many people were detained, tortured, like it happened in the worst moments of the worst military dictatorships. This civic, police, military coup generated a series of consequences and negative situations on all different aspects. Bolivia was a country that had an economic growth which was considerable for 6 years. It led that growth for 6 years, but the de facto government, the dictatorship, made use of those resources and other elements that were not as important. Within that aspect, there has been an economical crisis in Bolivia. There is a health crisis, an education crisis. But what is most unfortunate, precisely, is what was done with education. The de facto government did not have any plan to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. they didn't have either a plan regarding education. What they did was actually nefarious. First, they announced that all the students, due to the pandemic, after suspending the in-person classes, they said that there was an automatic promotion or production. This unmotivated students and teachers. And right in the middle of the year, this was a ministerial resolution, and by the same, they closed schools, and this affected almost 3 million children, teenagers, and youngsters. But I must also mention that professors of the different unions proposed strategies so that education and schools could continue performing and carrying out this fundamental right, which is education. They were not heard. And the fight was quite severe. And finally, on October 18, 2020, the people of Bolivia voted against them. And that is when Luis Arce Catacora won with 55% of the support of the people from Bolivia. This was a historical recovery of the people of Bolivia against the leftist sectors that added up for this important achievement. In that sense, we were honored by our President Luis Arce for us to take charge of the Ministry of Education. In that sense, the first thing we did was to contact all the different social union organizations that had to do with education. And obviously, we have also called students, who are the main subjects of the educational process. In that sense, we have developed our 6th pedagogical encounter of the plurinational educational system. We have had 2 workshops where we have worked very hard. We have had the participation of our president and all the educational authorities, union organizations, representatives of the students. And in this event, we have exchanged ideas on what we were going to do regarding education. Therefore, I will now allow myself to read the main conclusions of this 6th pedagogical encounter of the plurinational educational system. 1, we express our rejection to the economical, social, and educational neoliberal and privatizing policies developed by the de facto government and illegitimate government of Áñez that has destroyed the education of our country and has destroyed and has taken away the right to education of the Bolivian people. 2, we ratify the lawfulness of the law of Elizardo Perez and the educational model that is socioeconomic and productive. We ratify our will to recover the right to education of all the students within the framework of the political constitution of the state, with the full participation of the different educational and social institutions. 4th, we would like the elimination of the 4260 decree, which constitute a threat against the interests of the Bolivian people because it was designed to begin the privatization process of education to exclude the majorities. 5, we affirm that no educational alternatives that has been developed so far have been able to replace the direct relationship between professors and students to warranty an education of good quality. This is why we have defined that depending on the sanitary conditions and depending on the epidemiological studies, in every context, we will develop 3 different modalities to warranty the restart of the education: an in-person modality, a semi-in-person modality, and a remote learning modality. complemented by tele-education, radio education, educational platforms, and other pertinent resources. 6, we ask all the levels of the government, both from the centers, from the different departments and municipalities under the corresponding regulations and competencies of the government, we ask them to warranty the conditions and the biosafety supplies to be able to go back to school in a safe manner. 7th, we jointly assume both teachers, mothers, fathers, social organizations, and educational institutions the co-responsibility to recover the learning time that was lost due to the closure of the school year performed by the de facto government through different processes in the year 2021 in the first quarter. 8, we declare the year 2021 as a year in favor of the right to education. 9, the documents for the proposals presented by the organizations and institutions that participated in this 6th encounter of the educational system will be taken into account by the Ministry of Education. So within this framework, we have designed a regulation to recover the right to education for all our students. Through Decree 4449, we eliminated that law that intended to privatize the education. That was Decree 4260 of the de facto government. But also in that decree, it was established that the year 2021 would be the year for the recovery of the right to education. So within that framework, the Ministry of Education has established the Ministerial Resolution 001 for 2021 in order to establish the legal administrative criteria for the beginning of educational activities, which precisely have that characteristic. The calendar, the educational calendar has 2 characteristics: regular education for elementary, for kindergarten, elementary, and high school education. That is one calendar. And we are going to dedicate that first quarter for that learning process that was lost. And in the second and in the third quarter, we have designed an approach of the school year corresponding to the year 2021 within that framework, and taking into account the criteria to preserve the health and the life of our children and of our students. We have opted to begin the educational activities in most of the country through the distant learning modality. To that effect, we have designed learning texts, learning books that go from the first year of elementary school, second year of elementary school, and the other years of the elementary school. We have taken into account the proposals of our teachers, of our professors, in order to design these books that have been already distributed throughout the country for free. Evidently, this includes the kindergarten and the elementary education. For high school, we have digital texts. This distance component is constituted by the educational platform that is called educa.minedu.bo.gov. This is for the teachers and students. They can have access to that website and they can complete the different courses and they can follow the different components of the educational platform, which works in a sequential manner so that our students, and we have several of them in every household, for them to have the technological resources in order to have access to the platform, where they will find a repository, they have documents, they will find text, books, regulations, and they also have one space to interact in a virtual manner through this platform. We have almost 80% coverage throughout the country. There are areas we have not reached with the platform, but for those spaces, we have the textbooks. There is something else that we have recovered based on the experience of the countries of the ALBA-TCP, and that has to do with the teleeducation and radio education. The state channel, Channel 7 of Bolivia Teleculturas, they have allowed us to use 3 hours of their programming a day in order to provide teleclasses. So with this component, we are able to reach many more households, many more students. The other component has to do with radio education. So with this means, we're able to reach all our students around the country. In that sense, we are making progress in the distance learning modality. We began classes on February the 1st. And after we finish this month, we're going to make the first assessment of the development of these activities. There is another percentage of students, a very small percentage, 10% of them are attending school in a semi-presential modality to avoid infections of COVID-19, following the necessary biosafety measures. However, the most important aspect has to do with the decision of our president, Luis Arce Catacora, to protect the health and the life of all the citizens of Bolivia, especially of our children. To that effect, and thanks to the support of sisterly nations such as Russia and China, we now count with the nasal antigen tests that are quite efficient in order to know the results in a short period of time. And then we can give immediate assistance to positive cases of COVID-19. Another important measure has to do with the reception of the vaccines. Those vaccines will immunize people. We've been able to vaccine the medical staff, the healthcare staff of the entire country. Next, we're going to apply the vaccine on the rest of the populations, on the people also who are older than 60 years of age. And the third block, which will be performed in March, is the vaccine for the rest of the population. We have asked professors to receive the vaccines as well. We have the possibilities then to go back to school in a semi-presential manner in the short term and in a total personal manner in the long term. We are confident on that. Finally, I would like to manifest once again our position of integrating and strengthening with more energy the possibility of building the large homeland between all the sisterly nations that share one principle that has to do with sovereign development and the fight against the Yankee imperialism. In that sense, we appreciate the fact that you invited us to inform you about what we are doing in Bolivia. And we also thank the friendly countries that have supported us in that noble effort of eradicating illiteracy in Bolivia. Thank you very much to our friends of Cuba and Venezuela. This has been quite important for all of us. It is necessary to generate spaces to exchange ideas and proposals regarding the economical development, but also regarding the development of education. So we are quite thankful. I would like to greet you once again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our friend, the Minister of Education of Bolivia, Adrian. I would like to mention one aspect. It is important to mention that in Bolivia, they've not only recovered democracy, but they've also recovered a transformation process. If there's one lesson that has to be learned by the peoples of the world has to do with what has happened in Bolivia. And that is that when agents that have nothing to do with national interest take power, they can destroy the advances that have been achieved in a short period of time. And the government of President Luis Arce has demonstrated that by recovering democracy, they've also recovered the structural transformation process. Next, I would like to give the floor to Miriam Soledad Raude Rodriguez, Minister of Education of the Republic of Nicaragua. We now give you the floor. Good afternoon, dear friends who form part of this important historical organization, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America. Thank you for inviting us to share some of our experiences. Along with me in this work session, we also have the presence of Salvador Vanegas Guido, who's the Minister, President, and Advisor for Educational Matters, who is connected online. We have also Ramona Rodriguez, who is the President of the National University Councils and the Rector of the Autonomous University of Managua, Mr. Arturo Collado, who's a permanent representative for UNESCO in Nicaragua, Jose Antonio Cepeda, who's the Secretary General of the Andean Union of Nicaragua, and Siddhartha Marin from the Foreign Relations Ministry. Now I am going to talk to you and to Salvador and Ramona, who also form part of the National Commission of Education. They will be also sharing some topics, some subjects that are included in the agenda. We're going to make an effort and we are going to try to be specific because we have to save time. We are here today and we would like to share some strategies, educational strategies that we are implementing within the framework of the COVID-19. We are convinced that there is not one common recipe to confront this challenge. Every country has confronted this challenge based on their cultural, social, and economical realities. And this is why every country is working. And I was listening to you when you were talking about adopting the best strategies to keep the right to education. And in the case of Nicaragua, our President, Commander Daniel Ortega, Rosario Murillo, who extend their warmest greeting during this activity, from March 11th, 2020, they guided us in a precise manner to all the agencies that form part of the educational system in order to perform a strategy and attack this pandemic that was affecting the world. So we began to apply this strategy and we applied 4 basic stages with different scenarios depending on how the pandemic advanced. The first one that we considered had to do with preventive education to preserve health during classes, in-person classes. This was the first measure that we carried out because we educated parents and students about the protocols established by national and international health authorities. Because it was said the hygiene and the hygienic protocol was important to prevent the disease. We were also working on a scenario of a non-presential modality by the implementation of various didactical strategies taking into account the families, because we had the conditions to confront and to confront this non-presential classes. We were clear on the fact that many families did not have access to the devices and to the internet. And on the other hand, our territory is geographically scattered. And due to the fact that we did not have the possibility to connect ourselves to the internet, we were careful enough in order to carry out all different scenarios, in-person, semi-in-person, etc. Within the strategies that we had already worked on, but that we developed even further, had to do with the teleclasses with Channel 6, which is the educational TV channel. We use teleclasses for students who at some point their parents decided not to send them to classes due to fear. So we began to work on all different platforms that we had with the Ministry of Education, digital platforms, guidelines, house-to-house visits, all the resources that we could work on in an innovative manner, we did it. The other stage had to do with mitigation, which was one scenario. It has to do with the mitigation of the impact of the return to school. From that number of students in some municipalities, there were 5 municipalities nationwide that were highly affected by the temporary absence from school. Our goal in that sense was to return them to school. But also we wanted to achieve a social and emotional recovery of the students. There's also another stage that has to do with the resilience. We are still learning of this situation, from the situation, and we are getting ready for new challenges. Preventive education for health. For us, this is one of the main strategies in this sanitary crisis. We were able to achieve the fact that 100% of the public schools implemented these guidelines with all the protocols, with particular situations in some municipalities. Today, this strategy is being implemented in a very responsible manner and following the guidelines issued by the health authorities. The results indicate that in this moment, there is no academic center, no family, or no student that does not know about this type of prevention. But apart from that, we also know that there are no academic centers that have been the focus of the COVID-19. However, the government, respecting the decisions of some families that decided that their children were not going to go to school and complying with the mandate, we got organized in an extraordinary way in order to facilitate learning manners that were adequate for all students at all levels, accompanying teachers, directors, always watching over the learning stages, the different textbooks and the platforms. Why did we give priority to the in-person classes? This is a topic that we were analyzing before March 11th. We consulted with families, specialists. We took into account the social and pedagogical and economical factors, and we especially took into account the reality of most of the families of Nicaragua that do not have optimum conditions and are not prepared to confront. They were not prepared for the non-presential strategy due to different reasons. On one hand, some of our families could not get the equipment, but on the other hand, the rural schools were not ready, were not prepared. So we decided to standardize the non-presential classes, taking into account those factors. So we did not standardize only one strategy, because this violated the right of human beings to public education. If we did that, we would have excluded thousands of students that for several reasons could not attend school. So in the cases of private schools, we also respected the fact that they reached certain agreements with the representatives. The private schools in Nicaragua represent 16% of schools of the country, and they agreed on having a percentage in the year 2020. 40% were classes in person. This year, 2021, we started our school year with 100% of classes in person in the public schools of Nicaragua, with a curriculum that has exceeded the goals that were foreseen. And there's only one small percentage that is non-presential modality. We have not seen any alert so far And teachers, the teaching community is still applying the sanitary protocols implemented by the authorities. This topic that has to do with prevention, we have done it throughout the national educational system, through the different platforms that we have with the National University Council, where we have the CNU, the National Technological Institute, and the Ministry of Education. We have performed all necessary actions to warranty the educational continuity. On one hand, I believe that we have been able to achieve this because we have strengthened the interinstitutional alliance. This has strengthened us. We have done this also with public institutions. This is a strategy where we include all the scenarios, including the one that we have so far, which is the decision of developing this in-presence modality. Another topic that led us to continue with this in-person strategy 100% had to do with a permanent link and communication with the family, which was fundamental to us. These were families that supported us and that were clear on the fact that we were taking care of their children, but we were also giving them other possibilities. And in this case, the case of distant learning in the elementary school and high school has also been a significant breakthrough that we applied, that the government has applied in the agenda of the Republic with priority, starting from the principle that education is enshrined in the development plan. Education is conceived as a right to human being, and human being as a center of all the activity that we must carry out. In 2007, we found that 80% of rural schools had only up to fourth grade students attending schools. According to the mandate of the President of the Republic, we began, if we study all the time that has elapsed, we see that 100% of students are attending the sixth grade, and this represents a very good coverage. But this was also a challenge for us to work on high school in rural areas. For the first time in the history of Nicaragua in education, we had service or schooling for these students in rural areas, students who lived in areas that were quite far. So nowadays, we count with at least 600 academic institutions in the field, in the country side. And our friend Ramona Rodriguez will talk about this in further detail. She will talk about one of the priorities of our government. So in general, the educational system is providing assistance to all the students. And we would like to have education for everyone. We don't want anyone to be left behind. So the same way we have been assisting the academic topic, the infrastructure topic, the snacks topic, we are also working on the success of the distant learning modality, which lies on the right that everyone has to study with an inclusive and equitative model without discriminating anyone, focused on the development of the human being, on equality. And that is how we are also looking at the subject of literacy. Nowadays, we do not have illiteracy. We are working on that. In 2007, the illiteracy had increased. But in 2007, we were able to start a campaign. It was a beautiful campaign with the support of Cuba, Fidel, and also with the support of Venezuela. We have made huge progress and we have exchanged working methods. So this is the Sandinista Front. the one that began this literacy program. Today, we would also like to ratify that we are continuing with this work. And regarding the general educational breakthroughs, I would like to talk about prevention. We're focusing on it from the values promotion aspect. We have to consider students, families. We have to have a holistic assistance from all different aspects, from a physical aspect, social, emotional aspect. All of these matters are included in the curriculum in Nicaragua. The topic that has to do with mental health, we have given priority to this topic. Our responsibility as an educational system is to identify situations that are not normal in order to enable students and families to prevent situations that might affect the family harmony and the school harmony. Each one of us in the Ministry of Education and in the University Council of University and in INATEC, and according to the characteristic of our surroundings, we have defined specific strategies that allow the health and development of teachers and families as main actors. Since 2014, the Ministry of Education has created the educational communities that serve as tools that allow us to prevent a series of situations such as bullying and violence in all of its expressions. These educational council communities have been formed to receive early alerts in order to have a healthy environment. We have more than 40,000 members. They are volunteers, they are students, teachers, and parents, and even friends and neighbors of the schools who have expertise and they serve as voluntary. The topic that has to do with addiction, we are working on this not only in the commission, but we've also worked on this from other institutional agencies. We are part of different commissions who are tackling on this topic because we must have a healthy youth. Sports, for example, is another topic that is quite important. Another challenge that we might have, and my friends are going to talk about that, is to make sure that we will have an education for everyone in order not to have anyone excluded from the educational system. We have to be open to the new way of building challenges, to define new policies.
Ensure quality in all levels and all modalities. This demands to understand each situation and to put in, in favor of education all the strategies, methods, tools, professors' training, scientific research in all levels to continue deepening, to perfect trust between schools and households. Without the households, it is impossible to move forward. We share the same interests, the training of their children. We need to perfect methods which are pertinent so distant learning can build learning and answer the needs of the families and the country, and to learn and use technologies for information and communication. I give the floor to our friend, Minister Salvador Vanegas Guillen. Thank you, ministers, accompanying us in this important seminar. We have the basic and medium level. We have the National Council of University, responsible for the education as a whole, and it has a coordinating role for university education. National Technological Institute, devise and implement technical teaching and vocational training and the regional body responsible for the Caribbean regions of Nicaragua. We've been working together under the mandate of President Ortega and Vice President Murillo to develop a number of strategies, systematic, in order to transform education, ensuring quality education. It is a right that was snatched by neoliberal government in the 16 years where we went backward in our revolution of the 80s. I can give you some strategies that we've been working with in this system. Given the pandemic, the guideline has been to ensure the right to education in any circumstance and in any context. Public education is open, has never been closed, applying all the protection measures through the biosecurity protocols and through tele learning the families that had irregular attendance. We have preserved school meals. 1 million school meals are provided to the primary teaching schools and rural schools. And also, we have made extraordinary effort in record time to develop new skills for teachers for the new curriculum. So 2020 has been closed with good results regarding uh, attendance, enrollment, and diagnosis that gave us the program progress in the curriculum and the indicators of achievements through a number of tests applied. And they give us the possibility to start the new cycle 2021 based on the diagnosis test. So there's a continuum. We have a continuum preventing lacunes given the pandemic. So education is a right in any circumstance and in any context. In technical training, we have a strategy to expand this training, especially for sectors excluded by neoliberal governments through various modalities. We have gone from 56 centers of vocational teaching in 2007 to 50 centers, and they are fully equipped with the appropriate uh, equipment for TVET. We have various strategies to reach through technical training to technological transfer for productivity in the rural areas and new entrepreneurships. Among these strategies, we have National Center of Innovation and Technology, responsible for the hacker events on an annual basis. So we have a platform to project innovative young in the use of science and technology connected to various alternatives of social economic development. This center is an alternative, it's a hotbed of new technologies with our people and connected to the needs of the world. We have technical training in the rural areas. So technological transference for productivity for the farming areas where we have beans, coffee, vegetables, cattle raising, and so on. And municipal trade schools to, to train the people required through technologies and various alternatives of trade and skills. We have devoted a lot of energy for arts and culture. We want to create a comprehensive education. Human beings served from all perspectives, arts, artistic talent, human development, to rescue our traditions, affirmation of our national identity and history through arts and cultural education. We have one of the largest symphonic youth symphonic orchestra, 50 orchestras, symphonic orchestras have been created so far, and a network of choirs through Darío, with more than 7,000 choirs, organizing more than 200 voices, expressing their voices, and they affirm the national identity, the pride to be Nicaraguans, and strengthening this model of reconciliation. Another topic is the strengthening of multilingual and multicultural education, together with the subsystem of economic and regional institutes. We're working with the translation into the language of original population, reflecting the cosmovision based on different subject matters. We have translated educational material to the Miskito, Giu, Tawaska, and Kanamaska peoples. Also, the training of teachers in the intercultural strategies, bilingual strategies. In the Nicaraguan Caribbean area, we face the challenge of the pandemic, and also we are facing the two hurricanes, category 4 and 5, Iota and Eta, which affected our infrastructure. The response was immediate. We accompanied the households in tackling the effects. So for the first day of schools, all of them were opened. We have an extraordinary infrastructure project to rebuild schools, classrooms, to have full meal, training of teachers, and so on. And also, we accompany our people to face the pandemic and to open the schools in February. This was achieved. And we continue accompany them to strengthen even further the rehabilitation cost of the damages caused by the hurricanes. We also deal with the provision of the teaching force. We are accompanied here by Jose Antonio Cepeda, deputy of the Sandinista Front and Secretary General of the Teachers Union, Association of Teachers of Nicaragua. We are working together with them for the teachers be a force, one that should be updated in all fields of knowledge through various means, through pedagogical meetings, and meetings at the end of every month, and do video conferences monthly to strengthen our knowledge through the assistance of experts and specialists. And we invite the ALBA ministers to developing further this. Cuba has accompanied us in these video conferences where we pose various strategies to share and to deepen our knowledge, but also working in order to learn to do, to command the tools to make sure that things happen and that this strategy of transformation of education becomes a reality. And also work on attitudes, the commitment, the, the service commitment, the justice principle to strengthening our educational system. The school, with the teachers, the leaders of the teachers as leaders, they are the guarantee for the transformation occur. I give the floor to Ramona Rodriguez, President of the National Council of Universities and President of Autonomous National University of Nicaragua, so we can close this exchange with you. Thank you very much. Greetings to the Minister of Education and the various delegations. The universities members of the CNU of Nicaragua to face the pandemic, we have developed various strategies enabling key actors share reflections and experiences, stressing the following aspects: leadership of teachers to transform the teaching practices. This is the develop of technological skills as a tool to build learning, transitioned from the virtual and semi-virtual to the development of learning with a systemic approach and responsibility, shared responsibility involving the community through the promotion of the learning communities and the rescue of the knowledge, the proactive attitudes of the leaders of the university to accompany the implementation of strategies contributing to give continuity to education, taking into account the biosecurity protocols to save life, the socio-emotional follow-up with the communities in this new context, given the COVID, the change of role of the teacher as mediator and the student as an actor of education. So education from and since the community to strengthen knowledge, recognition of the capacity of a learner for self-regulation, inter-learning with the accompanying and the assistance of the teachers and the authorities, the curriculum essential to respond to their demands, to strengthen development of skills linked to the various subject matters from an integral perspective and the capacity to adapt, to ensure participation of the students without distinctions on social, economic, or cultural, religious distinctions, analysis of the learning environments, enabling students to resolve problems within and without the classroom, motivates and understand daily situations, increasing interaction of teachers and students, innovation using various resources. From universities and CNU, committed with the promotion of actions contributing to ensure the continuity of education with quality, we would like to underline continuous innovation in teaching techniques to develop technological capabilities as essential for learning. The accompaniment for strategies to strengthen the continuity of learning and social emotional skills of the stakeholders, taking into account the biosecurity protocols to safeguard the life of students. From the perspective of resilience, to strengthening the pedagogical perspective, to see the communities beyond the pandemic, stressing interculturality and the rescue of knowledge of the community to ensure the students, the presence of students in the universities, because it's essential to restore the right to education in a comprehensive and free manner. Promotion of dialogue of knowledge as a space of construction of the various cultures with different cosmovisions to serve health and illnesses from various perspectives, spiritual, physical, taking into account the integrity of the human being. Generation of cultural changes in individuals to strengthen the skills to contribute to the common good, and to strengthen the skills for self-learning, inter-learning, and self-regulation as a means to ensure the management of learning from the perspective of a shared responsibility. These strategies have been both for universities in the various cities and also university in the rural areas. We have started this year, 2020, in a successful fashion in in-person classes, ensuring the enrollment of 4,000 young people from the rural areas. And I'd like to stress our commitment of higher education as jointly with the rest of the system, always committed with the continuity in the training of teachers, both at university level and other levels as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the distinguished delegation of Nicaragua for their excellent contribution.
Distinguished Minister of Education, Sports, and Creative Industries of Antigua and Barbuda, Daryl Matthew. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Mrs. Rosa Greenaway. I give apologies for the Honorable Minister, Daryl Matthew. He had to step out on an emergency. So this afternoon, the Director of Education, Mr. Clay Brown, will speak on his behalf.
Good afternoon, everyone. And we here in Antigua and Barbuda would like to thank you all for this opportunity to share our experiences here in Antigua and Barbuda. Like most other countries, when the pandemic started, we found ourselves, the education system, we found ourselves in really some uncharted waters. We closed school immediately in the middle of March last year, and we went to remote learning. Now, remote learning presented some problems for us at the beginning because many of our students, well, not many, but several of our students didn't have access to devices, nor or those who might have had devices, the connectivity was an issue. However, we tried to do our best to engage all the students we possibly could. Generally speaking, we were able to reach about 75–80% of the students through, not solely through electronic means, but we also included some online package, not online, some learning packages, so that those who could not have gotten online were able to be engaged through these physical learning packages that teachers prepared and we passed out. When we were able to resume school in May, in the middle of May last year, for the senior students, those who were preparing for the secondary exit examination. And we had online and in-person classes for those students. Those students were able to successfully negotiate, the majority were able to successfully negotiate the Caribbean examination offered by the secondary examination offered by the Caribbean Examination Council. Once that happened and school broke for the summer, then we began preparation in earnest for the ensuing academic year, the current academic year. And so we spent a lot of time in the summer preparing our physical facilities, because we recognize physical distancing would have been creating a problem for us in terms of accommodating students in the way we would normally have accommodated them. And so we expanded several of our school plants, our physical facilities, particularly in the primary sector. As well, we engaged in rigorous training of our teachers. we train teachers through synchronous and asynchronous means. Obviously, to operate in a virtual space is not the same in terms of pedagogy. Teaching methods is not the same as in-person teaching. And so we spent a good number of hours ensuring that our teachers were brought up to speed to do online training. And as I said, we would have expanded our physical facilities. We also placed much emphasis on providing that psychosocial support to our teachers. We provided psychosocial support to our parents, because many of the parents would have found themselves in a place where they were no longer employed. And then we provided much psychosocial support for our children and young people who probably didn't understand what was going on. Thankfully, in September, school was able to reopen at the normal place when we would have started the academic year. So on September 7 of this academic year, we were able to open. And once we reopened, we determined that students would have been accommodated in schools, in the larger schools, on a shift system. So we operated a hybrid sort of education systems. Students, as I said, we would have reduced the number of students on the school plan to accommodate, to ensure that we're following whatever necessary protocols that needed to be followed, the government established protocols. There was a shift system, students coming, groups of students coming on alternate days. We also retrofitted many of our institutions to ensure that there were proper hand washing stations and hand sanitizing facilities in place, so that our students could practice proper hygiene, could engage in proper hygienic practices. And so we continued like that. Our focus was learning recovery. Obviously, having broken school and shifted into that remote learning mode in the way we did earlier in last academic year, then some things were not covered. And with our teachers struggling to operate in that online space or that virtual space, then we ended up not being able to cover the curriculum in the way we would normally have done. Therefore, our focus, the thrust was, when we started school in earnest in September, the thrust was curriculum recovery. And so we spent much of the time doing that, ensuring that the gaps were filled, the students and teachers followed the protocols that we established, because we spent a lot of time working with the Ministry of Health, establishing protocols so as to ensure that our students and teachers and all who operate within our school system remained safe. And for the most part, we were able to function. 3 weeks ago, unfortunately, based on the epidemiological situation of our state, we were forced to go back into the online, the remote modality of teaching and learning. The second time, this time around, when we went into remote learning, we were better prepared, since our teachers would have received some measure of training, and since we would have done one or two things to ensure, with service providers here, to ensure that students were able to connect to the internet and things like those. So we are in a little better place. We are still to get some devices. The government of Antigua and Barbuda has gone out and sought to purchase devices so that all our students could have devices, but the world, everywhere in the world, they are seeking devices now. And so it has been a little while yet, and we haven't gotten those that are on order, but they are on order. And it is our fervent hope that those will come in short order so that we can at least insert those into the education system, and we would be in an even better place for students' education to continue. One thing for sure, we understand that there is life after the pandemic. We go forward with hope. We know that no student here in Antigua Barbuda should ever be left behind, and we do everything we can to ensure that we engage our students. Those who are still not able to connect to the internet because of lack of devices and so on, we continue to work with them through learning packages and any other way that we are able to connect with our students, just to make sure that no student at all here is left behind, and that there is, even in the place of abnormalcy, that we are seeking to bring some normalcy to our children and young people. And so we continue to do the best we can. Thank you for listening.
I thank the distinguished representative of Antigua and Barbuda for his presentation, and also for sharing all the experiences that you are having right now. Allow me now to give the floor to the Minister of Education from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Curtis King. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, and a pleasant good afternoon to colleagues. Today, what I promised to do is to look at the situation here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with regards to the challenges that we are facing and address some of our responses. But first, I wish to put within context our education system so that it becomes very clear the challenges that we are confronted with. We, like many other countries in the Caribbean and Latin America, endured a significant period of colonialism that left our societies with very serious gaps. Gaps in our economic development, gaps in our health, gaps in our education. Just about every component of our society, the experience of colonialism left its mark. Education suffered greatly because colleagues will agree with me when I say that in order to establish their hegemony, the colonialists had to, if you like, introduce their own education to ensure that they could control us. Therefore, education suffered a great deal. And in the post-independence period, the respective governments have embarked basically on a campaign to deal with these gaps. Working within the framework of the regional organization called the Organization of East Caribbean States, which is a sub-regional integration movement aimed at establishing social, economic, and political union among our countries here in the Eastern Caribbean. We have sought to deal with the reform of our education system. And basically that reform process, in our case, commenced in 1979 and continued for most of our existence as an independent entity. However, around 2010, we experienced a paradigm shift in terms of our education focus, where we moved from the reformist type strategy to one where we saw education as being very important in the construction of a post-colonial society. And as such, education became more focused in terms of producing the citizens who will be in a position to develop this post-colonial society. Hence, the focus now is lifelong education, quality education for living and production. And within this context, we too have adopted not really a slogan, but in practice, we too have said that we want to ensure that no child is left behind, and hence the need for us to have inclusive education. So I'm saying that we have done fairly good in terms of reducing the deficit that we inherited from colonialism. So deficit in access, deficit in equity in the education system. We have done fairly good reducing these. Unfortunately, with the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are faced with the threat that if we do not manage this pandemic properly, that some of the gains that we have made will be rolled back. And I want to add also that we here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are also confronted with two other major challenges. Namely, one, we have on one of our main islands, St. Vincent, a volcano that is today having an effusive eruption. And this effusive eruption started back in November, December. It is continuing as we speak. But the threat that we are very mindful of is that of an explosive eruption. This volcano has had a history of erupting over the many centuries, commencing with what we know from around 1718. There was one also in 1812, and next in 1902, and in the modern period, we had one in 1971 and 1979. Whenever these eruptions take place, especially those of an explosive type, life as we know it is severely disrupted. Schools are also closed, and hence the students develop gaps in their education system, in their education because of their being away from school. Additionally, we have had recently instances and incidences of dengue fever. And in our case, we have had 7 deaths. And so dengue fever is seen as a deadly disease here. And that also have implications for our face-to-face school and schooling as we know it. Importantly, though, we have not surrendered, so to speak. We are seeking, as far as possible, to address these challenges in a way that would help our students to continue their education. So what has been our response thus far? In the case of the COVID pandemic, it forced us to delay the opening of schools and to move to remote learning, or what is popularly referred to as online teaching. However, moving to that mode of instruction exposed some of the challenges that we face in a small developing society. One, we had a deficit in the number of devices available to students. We also had deficit in terms of the connectivity to the internet. And thirdly, we had some deficits also in the level of preparation of our teachers to deliver this mode of instruction. We have thus far sought to address these challenges. Firstly, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have a combined total, if we look at it from primary school to community college students, we have about 28,000 students and teachers. And what we have done is to seek to provide each teacher and student with a device, and we are using the tablets. So far, we have secured just over 17,000. These have been distributed to all the students in the secondary schools, all the teachers in the primary and secondary schools, as well as to students at the community college level. We have also distributed tablets to our grade 6 and most of our grade 5 students in the primary school. We still have a deficit in terms of those students between grade K and grade 4 and some of the grade 5. We are presently seeking to procure those devices, and hopefully we would get them up and running so that the students could participate in the online teaching learning process. We do have some challenges though, because although we have distributed a large number of devices, we find that some of our students are not grabbing the opportunity with both hands, in that many fail to log on. We had challenges also in the initial stage, especially with our teachers, and so we had to engage in training of our teachers to use the various platforms. And of course, we had challenges, as I indicated, with connectivity, and working closely with the providers, we have been able to address some of these. But despite what we would consider to be very good efforts on our part, we still have some challenges which we continue to work to overcome. And as we say, no system is perfect. So we recognize that for the enseeable future, we would have some challenges. And we are hoping though that we could do as much as possible to reduce these. In terms of the challenges presented by the threat of an explosive eruption of the volcano, we have been fortunate in getting and receiving support from the University of the West Indies Seismic Unit, which has a team on ground here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as supporting staff at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. And with the various stations that they have established here, they are able to monitor whatever activities is happening at the volcano round the clock, 24/7, so that they are able to advise the government as to any development that they identify which might indicate an imminent eruption, okay? And as such, I want to put on record our thanks and appreciation to the team of scientists from the UWI Seismic Unit for their effort thus far. With regards to the challenges from the dengue fever, very early, we have put our public health workers, we have mobilized them and have them in the fields, ensuring that the environment that is conducive to the breeding and the spread of the mosquitoes that cause the dengue fever, that the environment that sustains them is eradicated. And our health service and health workers are very much in tune. So, in terms of the way forward, we do recognize that from time to time, we are going to be faced with intermittent interruption of our school. And therefore, what we are seeking now to do is to promote even greater than we did before, ICT-infused education, so that in the event that we once again have schools being disrupted, that we could rely more heavily on the technology to reach our students. We see this as important because while we have done great work in the past, we recognize that these efforts could easily be rolled back, because in this new environment where technology is so important, if we don't have persons with access, then we could find that these persons, especially persons from the lower socioeconomic background, face with challenges and gaps in their education system, which could reduce our efforts at providing access, reduce our efforts at equity, reduce our efforts of having quality education. Now, in terms of our commitment to this integration process, I want once again to reiterate that commitment because we do recognize that as a Caribbean people, as persons from Latin America and this entire Caribbean, we do have authentic civilizations that are indeed noble, and it is our commitment, our right to ensure that these civilizations continue to prosper. That is why I reiterate once again our government's firm commitment to the people of Cuba and Venezuela in their difficulties with regard to what we consider to be the illegal blockade in the context of our Cuban brothers and sisters, and the illegal sanction in the context of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, their people, where hegemonic powers are seeking to destabilize their efforts at promoting the development of their people in their own likeness and fashion. We believe in this world, we are all people who are deserving of respect. And as our Prime Minister, Comrade Ralph, always remember to point out, we do recognize that we are not better than any other people, but no other people is better than us. And therefore, we must all work within this context of our global village to promote a development that will be of great benefit to our respective peoples. Doing so in peace and harmony, doing so with respect from each other. I want to wish this meeting continued success, and of course, we look forward to the decisions coming out of this meeting to see how best we could advance the integration process of the ALBA-TCP and our thrust forward in our continued effort to provide enhanced living circumstances for all of our people. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much for your intervention. Allow me please now to give the floor to Mr. John L. Powell, Minister of Education of the Federation of Sanket and Nevis. The floor, sir.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It is a pleasure to be representing St. Kitts and Nevis at this very important meeting of ALBA. It is particularly pleasing for me to be the representative, as I have recently been elected to our federal government and now sit as the Minister of Education. I believe that all of our experiences in light of COVID-19 over the past just about a year have been quite similar. We faced very similar challenges on varying degrees, but however, I think the challenges have been the same, and it is important for us to come together as a grouping such as ALBA to share with each other and to see how best we can work in partnership to overcome these challenges and to foster a better future for all of our peoples, and in this case, particularly for our educational systems. Here in St. Kitts, we have been particularly lucky, and we give thanks to God for that. To date, we have had a total of 41 COVID-19 cases, and we currently have 2 active cases. We continue to do our best to ensure that we limit those numbers and to ensure that we do what is necessary to protect our people. I am happy to report that just today, we have rolled out our national COVID-19 vaccination protocols. And so I myself, along with other members of the frontline groups, were able to be vaccinated, and this process will continue over the coming weeks and months. In relation to our educational system, our schools here in St. Kitts and Nevis closed in March of 2020, when we recorded our first COVID-19 positive case. However, we were able to facilitate regional examinations in June of 2020 by making exceptions during a general lockdown period for our fifth form students in particular, and our senior students to be able to do the various examinations. We were fortunate in that despite the challenges that were posed, we were able to return a general pass rate of approximately 90%. Our schools reopened in September as per pre-COVID schedule. This was done based on a document which we developed through our National COVID-19 Task Force, along with our Ministry of Education COVID-19 Task Force, that would have outlined all of the necessary protocols to protect our teachers, students, and other staff within our schools in particular. This document was made public in July of 2020 so as to facilitate public buy-in and education, and to garner the support of parents in particular as we open schools. Some of the mitigation exercises that we took included the bringing on of additional staff who were employed to assist with cleaning, adherence to the established COVID-19 protocols, health professionals, and additional teachers and teaching assistants. We would have also used the opportunity to integrate additional guidance counselors in our schools in particular to address the social issues and psychosocial support needed as a result of COVID-19, lockdowns for weeks at a time, and the general challenges that would have come as a result of even lessened economic activity. We also had no choice but to retrofit just about all of our schools with additional hand washing stations, sanitization stations, and to do some expansion in some of our schools. This was to facilitate appropriate physical distancing in the schools. We were at the time of lockdown in the process of upgrading a number of our facilities, particularly our technical and vocational centers. And so that did cause some challenges to us in terms of our ability to have maximum students attend school in person. And so we engaged in a shift system for our larger schools so as to have that physical distancing. I'm happy to report that as we continued the additional spaces in our schools and completed the upgrading processes, to date, we only have 2 schools that remain on a shift system. All of our schools now, or the rest of our schools now, have all of their students attending in person and as they did prior to the COVID-19 situation. We were forced to accelerate our e-learning or electronic learning platform rollout. This was something that we were in the process of doing prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, but as it is done in so many different spaces, we were forced to do in 10 weeks what we had been planning to do for 10 years. And so we rolled that out. that would have included the provision of tablets to our students across both islands, St. Kitts and Nevis. This exercise was done on a needs basis. So students who would have already had sufficient or appropriate devices to work on would not have received. Those who did not would have received based on an indication of need. We would have also provided hundreds of laptops to our teachers so as to have them participate in the electronic learning modality. General concessions have also been made for our teachers and students, those who can afford to and have chosen to purchase their own personal devices. We provide various concessions at our ports of entry. We have also been able to partner with our local internet service providers. Through doing so, we have negotiated preferential rates, and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is now subsidizing and providing for free Wi-Fi internet in hundreds of households who did not previously have Wi-Fi internet or could not afford Wi-Fi internet for one reason or another. This has been very instrumental in terms of facilitating our students in particular to access and utilize the online learning platforms. This also created an opportunity for us to upgrade the Wi-Fi or internet services to our schools in general. And so all of our high schools have been retrofitted and now have full Wi-Fi capability throughout all the campuses. And we are now in the process of doing the same thing with our primary level schools. Significant training has been provided for our teachers. This has been one of the areas of challenge, as it has been a bit difficult for some of our teachers who were not so tech savvy to be able to come on board in this, particularly in such a short period of time. But we continue to work with them, and the feedback has been good. And we look forward to continued training of both students and teachers. But obviously, our students nowadays are digital natives and are born with their fingers on a device. And so it has been a bit easier when it comes to the students. We continue to work to identify the best software platforms for our online modality. We have had to make certain changes along the way based on what works for our students. We, during the initial period of lockdown, had to utilize various social media platforms, whether it be WhatsApp or other social groupings. We utilize platforms such as this, such as Zoom and other video conferencing platforms. However, we have been able to identify through the help of, again, local telecommunication partners, platforms to allow for electronic teaching. But we are still trying to identify that ideal platform that will satisfy not just communication skills, but also the actual instruction via electronic modalities. Our general goals that we set prior to COVID-19, as we're still on track with. Much emphasis being placed on curriculum reform, particularly the build out of our technical and vocational education sector, and the continued professionalization of our teaching force. We are strengthening our online education modality so as to, and that continues to be of supreme priority. We have to get that right, and that is really our main challenge, but our main focus. And we think that we're well on the way to addressing that and providing resolution there. Our government has in December allocated the largest ever budget for the Ministry of Education here in St. Kitts and Nevis, some $140 4 million EC dollars, or approximately 40 million US dollars. For a country of 55,000, that is significant. It shows the prioritization of and commitment to supporting our educational infrastructure here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We continue to expand existing social programs that we had in place in light of the economic hardships that so many of our people now experience as a result of high unemployment due to the recession or almost removal of our tourism product. And so we continue to provide school meals, textbooks to our students, uniforms and scholarships for students who particularly in economic hardship. Our challenges really are limited to, as indicated before, the openness of some teachers in terms of training on our electronic learning platforms. Financial situations or financing will always be a problem, regardless of what country we're in. And as much as we would like to do, we will always have a need for additional financing. But we make do with what we have and are grateful for that. We continue to manage and streamline our electronic learning platform to best suit our situation. I believe that we've been quite lucky in many respects, and that is really where we look forward to making significant advancements. We continue to enjoy the partnership that we have with our brothers and sisters, not just in the Caribbean region, but also in Latin America, and hence our commitment to ALBA and to the partners therein. We look forward to working closely to ensure that not just as individual countries, but as a region, we are able to beat this COVID-19 pandemic and to be able to work together to assist all of our peoples to move forward and to increase the quality of living for all of our people. With those few words, I say thank you, and we look forward to coming up with real resolutions through this meeting for all of our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for your intervention, and also congratulations on your new responsibility. Allow me now, please, to give the floor to Emmeline Pierre, Minister of Education, Human Resources, Development, Religious Affairs, and Information of Grenada. Madam, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all. My name is Kevin Andel, and I'm the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. I would like to express a great pleasure to represent the Minister today. She's unable to make it, and she sends her apologies for not being here today. It is a great pleasure, as I said before, to represent the people of Grenada at this important meeting. COVID-19 presented a number of challenges to us as a nation, as it did to most of our colleagues across the Caribbean and Latin America. One of the major challenges that we were faced with in the beginning stage of the pandemic is that students were not being able to attend school physically for 6 months. Our schools were closed. So we were forced to embrace remote learning. However, our schools opened in September 2020 in a staggered manner to adhere to the COVID-19 protocols. Our teachers and students was also faced with the challenge of being without devices and connectivity in some parts of the country. We also face the challenge of some teachers refusing to engage in online teaching, and some students not being able to be reached with the online teaching. We had limited financial resources, limited time to prepare for the eventuality and the fallout of the COVID-19. And we had added to this industrial climate whereby our union, teachers union, was at loggerheads with us in regards to salary reduction, pension and gratuity, and other demands. Despite all of this, our government decided to face this crisis by looking at three major areas. First and foremost, stakeholder engagement. We use all the new and innovative means to reach out to our stakeholders and to communicate with them on the protocols and the plans of the ministry. And I can say that we had full participation from the majority of our key stakeholders. We also embarked on quick response to international developments, such as the production of materials and the distribution of school supplies and the engagement of different stakeholders regionally and internationally. We also reached out to our private sector and established public partnership. And we had partnership with our telecommunication providers, Digicel and Lime. And they provided internet services to the vulnerable. They also zero-rated a number of our learning management platforms and other platforms. That in itself provided an opportunity for us to move forward. We also had private sector companies such as Rubis Caribbean providing devices for a number of our vulnerable students. We also looked at the health and safety of our students and teachers, and we embarked upon upgrading our schools to be in compliant with our COVID-19 protocols. We employed additional human resources at the school for sanitation and for the enforcement of COVID-19 protocols. We went further as we realized and we recognize the whole issue of having the supporting framework for teaching and learning during such a challenging time. The Ministry of Education embarked upon a blended learning approach. In the beginning of the crisis, we did strictly remote learning. But when we returned to school in September, we embraced blended learning. That is a combination of face-to-face instruction and online or remote learning. We went firstly to develop and release basic national guidelines for online learning and teaching. We also develop and release a standard national guidelines for flexible timetables to cater for circumstances faced by our teachers and students. However, we needed a platform. We needed a learning management platform so that all our students and all our teachers can be engaged. Because what we faced during the lockdown, that a number of our schools and our teachers and students use varying platforms. They use WhatsApp was used, Edmodo, and a number of learning management platforms. What the ministry decided to do was to launch its own learning management platform, known as the MSTAR. And we created during that period over 25,000 credentials for MSTAR users and uploaded educational materials so that they can use. During the lockdown period, we also had to prepare our students for the CSEC examinations, or external examinations. And we used the learning management platform to provide the necessary materials to aid in learning. We also embarked upon the production of 100 educational videos in mathematics and videos for special need education students tutorials for teachers and parents and students, and we shared material on request to other countries who wanted to be part of our undertaking. As I said before, we also use social media platforms and our GIS to present to the general public 1 hour live sessions in teaching of mathematics and other areas. We develop and release many national COVID-19 protocols for schools because we had different protocols as the situation changed. During that hard and economic time when we faced with reducing revenue, we paid the salaries of all the persons in the education system, from cooks, cleaners, everybody that was attached to the Ministry of Education and was paid by the Ministry of Education, they were paid. We continue to pay the seed benefits to students, and we recognize the need during that period because of the trauma caused by the pandemic, that we increase our psychosocial support system to principals, teachers, and students alike, using various modes: online live programs, online calling, hotlines, and indeed face-to-face sessions. To empower our teachers, we are embarked on ongoing online training in e-learning, computer literacy, focus reskilling and upskilling for our principals and teachers. We have also launched a parenting support program. We have purchased over 22,000 devices for students and teachers. We have launched 18 ebooks for secondary schools, which is aligned to our local curriculum and that of CXCs. We are now in the process of developing ebooks for our primary school students. We continue to regularly upgrade our facilities and to fix our educational facilities, ensuring that our facilities are COVID compliant, but not only that, they are also student friendly. And last but not least, in terms of what we did, we fully implemented our MESH and CASIP projects. These projects were designed to provide broadband, internet, and Wi-Fi access to all public schools and community centers. Brothers and sisters, COVID-19 has taught us a very valuable lesson in the Caribbean, that we are resilient, and it taught us that, it has shown us that we are resilient, but we can achieve many things if we work together. The road ahead is very challenging and is faced with many complex problems. But as we have demonstrated as an organization, as a body, our fraternity of brothers and sisters, that when we put our heads together and we work together, we can achieve almost the impossible. Grenada is very grateful to be part of this ALBA, and we're committed to work with our brothers and sisters as we advance the education agenda across Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Grenada for his intervention. Allow me now, please, to give the floor to Mrs. Chandler Hyacinth, Permanent Secretary of Education, Human Resource Planning, Vocational Training, and National Excellences of the Commonwealth of Dominica. Madam, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having Dominica in this ALBA-TCP meeting. It's indeed our pleasure to be here. Firstly, let me apologize for the absence of the Honorable Minister who had to leave for another meeting. So we want to apologize for her absence. Today we have with us our Chief Education Officer and our Curriculum Measurement and Evaluation Officer. So the Chief Education Officer is going to share in the presentation as we look at what are the challenges we faced during COVID and how we overcome those challenges, and what were some of the lessons learned from the experience of COVID. Dominica is grateful to be part of this ALBA movement, and we will continue to give every support to this ALBA movement, as it is an opportunity for us to share and learn and build education in our region. At this time, I want to introduce our Chief Education Officer, who will share with us some of the strategies we employed during COVID and some of the lessons we learned from the experience.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. And as PS indicated, we are indeed happy to be here. And I want to also recognize our ambassador to ALBA, Mr. George, and the representative from the Venezuelan embassy, who is with us. Well, the two of them are with us as well. And as PS indicated, we are fully subscribed to the tenets of ALBA, especially in education, and that is to ensure that we use education as a vehicle for economic development and for enlightenment of our people. We believe that it is important for the system to provide balanced education for our students, ensuring that every learner is able to succeed and to make the best of the education that we provide. We also believe that education acts not only as a force for economic development, but as a stabilizing force, especially in emergencies. And we speak to education in emergencies, and COVID is one of the emergencies where education can provide that stabilizing factor for a population, for communities. And we recall after Hurricane Maria, education again served as a stabilizing force for us, because it was the one factor that we could use to ensure that students could associate with something that they know and that worked for us. So in emergencies, education provides that stabilizing force. Earlier in last year, in March last year, 2020, I believe on the 22nd of March, after we recorded our first COVID cases, we had to suspend face-to-face education and we went into remote mode. We were fortunate in that we immediately, when we heard COVID cases were being identified around us in the region, we sought to prepare ourselves for the online modality. And in that, we started putting structures in place, sensitizing our population, our principals, our teachers, and ensuring that we were in sort of a modality that could facilitate that sort of experience. So earlier o'clock, when we recognized that challenge, we started doing data gathering. We looked at some of the most critical data, looking at students with devices, what sort of devices were available to the population, the connectivity, looking at which communities we had challenged, because that was important to us in terms of connectivity, and which schools had connectivity, and which homes had connectivity, and what devices teachers and students had. From that, we recognized that we could move forward with our online experience, but we had to make provisions, special provisions for communities where we had challenges. And in so doing, we also sought to provide folders with worksheets for students. We also provide what we call flash drives, jump drives, flash disks with material that students, interactive material, because we recognize that some students had devices but no internet connectivity. So they made use of the activities on the flash drives. And we also provided care packages for students. This was important because we recognized that in many cases, our schools provide feeding programs for our children when they're at school. We recognize that the students were pretty much at home, and therefore we had to cater for some of their needs as well, some of their nutritional needs. So in some cases, we provided those packages for our students. And that was important for us. We continued for training of teachers to ensure that they were sufficiently prepared for the online experience. So we did a lot of teacher training, a lot of parent sensitization, because we recognized it was a new modality for us going fully online, and we needed everybody on board. We also did a number of public awareness campaigns that included flyers, leaflets, as well as radio programs. And we did demonstrative lessons on the national television station, that is the Government Information Service, where we could reach out to homes with lessons. Teachers participated very strongly in that. Our curriculum unit provided the leadership in that regard. And we sensitized teachers and allowed them to deliver lessons online, which went very, very well. We also facilitated the CSEC examinations as well as our national assessment during that period, ensuring that all protocols were in place for student safety. We always stress on 3 imperatives in delivery of education: safety first, then comfort, and then student learning. And that went relatively well. All throughout the process, we gathered information because we knew that the COVID experience would have been one that would have remained with us for a while. So we continued gathering data and ensuring that we made relevant changes along the way. During the summer of 2020, we did extensive work in preparing for return to normal online, face-to-face education, normal classes. And we engaged all our stakeholders, including our parents, students, teachers, and the community as a whole in designing our COVID guidelines and our response to the COVID pandemic in a face-to-face environment. And that included ensuring that we had the hygiene and other protocols in place. In September, resumed normal education. By that time, we had our COVID guidelines where we could have shared it with the public, with all our teachers, principals, parents, and students. We also put a number of other factors in place. One, we increased significantly our quantum of supplies to schools because we knew that we would have had to focus on hygiene. We also did deep cleaning of a number of our education facilities. We ensured that we increased the number of cleaners at our schools. We had to put in place what we call, along with the National Employment Program, hygiene wardens, where schools had persons who were identified to ensure that students followed the protocol and ensure that parents and other members of the public who would visit the schools would have followed the protocols. We ensured the wearing of masks at our schools. That was part of the protocol, as well as social distancing. Now, in social distancing, a peculiar challenge came about: the need to ensure that the students within the classroom were at sufficient distance apart, and that needed a review of the space within the classroom as well as the furniture that we use with students. So in many cases, we had to use single desks as opposed to double desks. So it meant that the Ministry of Education had to source additional furniture and ensure that our classrooms had the requisite furniture for students. But it also meant that our classroom size could not accommodate the number of students in a typical classroom. And in many cases, we had to have what we call shift systems. So some schools where the numbers did not allow us to have the sort of social distancing adequately, we had a shift system with those students where some students came in the morning and others came in the afternoon. And for that, again, we had to increase the number of teachers in the classroom to ensure that worked well. We had to ensure that all our schools were equipped with internet facilities, even during the online learning. From our data gathering exercise, we noticed that a number of communities did not have internet. It would have taken some time to ensure that all the communities had internet, but what we sought to do is ensure that the schools had internet. So all our students were able to benefit from the online experience by just visiting their schools if they did not have internet at home. And that was important to us, especially for the secondary schools, where the students had to access their learning. We paid special attention to students within marginalized groups. And I speak of students with special needs because we recognize that they too, to a greater extent, would have needed special attention during the COVID pandemic, as well as students from socioeconomic groups that may not have been able to afford some of those gadgets and devices that we would have needed to ensure that adequate learning was necessary. So our special education and yes, and in our guidelines, we paid special attention to those groups as well. We provided devices to students in a number of schools, and it's a continuous process. So we have a number of partners that we're working with, as well as the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica, in ensuring that students have access to devices, and it's a continuous process. So we will eventually ensure that all our students can benefit from that. We also felt it was very important to ensure that we continue the training with our teachers. As I said, right now we're doing for face-to-face learning. In September, when we resumed face-to-face, we did what we'll call an assessment of the students to see where the learning gaps were. And we ensured that we had sufficient academic recovery initiatives for the students. We also ensured that we had psychosocial engagement of both our teachers and our students, as well as parents where the need arose. So our parents, some of them were, I mean, you know that the economic challenges with some parents losing their jobs and so on. We had to ensure that our parent community were on board with us in terms of our initiatives. As I said, we have sought to continue the training with our teachers in blended approach because we noticed we are aware that it's a fluid situation. Many of our sister territories are in a very difficult place in terms of the prevalence of COVID. We are fortunate in Dominica that we could focus on teaching and learning to a great extent in a face-to-face environment, but we are not taking that for granted. We're ensuring that we continue sensitizing persons on the importance of the protocols. We'll continue providing the resources to schools. I'm sure that PS may want to touch base on some of those major areas in terms of our intervention in that regard, both in terms of infrastructural intervention as well as devices and our programs in that regard. But safe to say that we are in a good place in Dominica, thanks to the effort of the Commonwealth, the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica, in ensuring that we have a united front in our fight against the COVID pandemic. Our citizens have, by and large, really been collaborative in the exercise, in observing the protocols and ensuring that we work together as a nation in fighting the COVID pandemic. And this is greatly reflected in the success that we have been enjoying in terms of our fight against the COVID pandemic. So we have done well as a nation in fighting the pandemic. So I'll pass on to PS to give a little update on some of the additional measures.
In terms of additional measures, we are continuing to procure devices so that all our students will be equipped with devices because we continue in the blended approach. We can also say we are pleased that we have received vaccines, and the government has rolled out its protocol for vaccinations, and our citizens getting their vaccines started 2 weeks ago. And this week it is opening up for all teachers and persons in education besides the general public to get their vaccinations. And that is giving us added protection to our citizens. And in terms of the COVID standing, we have had a number of positive COVID test cases, but we have had very few hospitalizations and we have had no deaths. And that is putting us in a very good position as it relates to management of COVID here in Dominica. But certainly we have learned lessons from this approach. We have learned that in terms of infrastructure, there are a number of things that we have to do with schools in terms of the size of classrooms, in terms of water troughs, and hygiene facilities at school. We must give focus attention to those areas. It has certainly influenced what we will do with the training of teachers, because we must engage in online learning. So we must engage in training of teachers in the blended approach. We have to give more support to psychosocial support, and this we have been doing, and we will continue to do it as we'll continue to have more counselors engaged, so that we can have more of our people having an avenue to deal with their social issues. But generally in Dominica, we have been progressing well in terms of our COVID response. And we want to say thanks to the government, who is supporting every measure that we are using to mitigate the spread of COVID in Dominica. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegation of the Commonwealth of Dominica for their contributions. Quiero dar la bienvenida, me siento muy honrado.
Next, I would like to welcome, I feel honored and privileged to welcome Jorge Arriaza, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, who is here with us today in this meeting. Thank you very much, Minister. I would like to give the floor to the chairman of BANALBA, the Banco de ALBA, to Raul Licausi. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. First of all, I would like to salute all the distinguished ministers of education, our vice president, our foreign minister, foreign affairs minister, and I would like to thank you for the invitation that you have posed to me to be present in this meeting of the senior authorities on education of the ALBA-TCP. I would like to commend you for the dynamism of the activities of the ALBA. We are quite pleased to see how dynamic the movement is. We see that every week there's a meeting. Last week there was a meeting on agriculture. The week before there was a meeting on health. We're going to have another meeting for the political council. So it's a quite dynamic agenda. In my case, as a chairman of the BANALBA, I always hear attentively all the presentations because that was part of the expectations that we had. When we were preparing this meeting, we sat down and we talked with the political team on several occasions, and we discussed about what were the things that we could offer, or how can BANALBA finance education during the post-COVID era. Some people call it the during COVID era because we have not applied all the vaccines yet. So as long as we don't apply all the vaccines, we will still confront the pandemic. In the end, there will be a learning because probably the world changed and the world of education has changed, and you can note that. So what we proposed was to, first of all, listen attentively to each one of the delegations, to hear what were the tools that they have used, how they have implemented education during this time, and to see the needs that those countries have mentioned. We heard attentively, for example, how Cuba put to our service the technologies they applied for the distant learning. And those technologies were successful even before the pandemic. I even remember that on many occasions I traveled to Cuba and I saw people taking notes and attending classes through TV, language classes. I remember that particularly. So this is not a novel thing in our country. The thing is that the need has led us to perfect all these methodologies. Besides, there are new methodologies. So Cuba has an experience on that and they can share it. There's a program that is called Yes, I Can. We have to remember that BANALBA has already participated. And the second large area that BANALBA has financed throughout this year since its creation in 2008 has to do with education. First, we worked on the infrastructure, agriculture, and education areas with the grand national programs, with the financing of the literacy programs. So I believe we have a series of tools, and I also believe that there are countries with large experience. We attentively heard to the Ministry of Education of Bolivia when he said that they declared this year as a year for the right to education. This is quite related to the Sustainable Development Goals. We also heard to Nicaragua and the importance of the remote learning and the role and the participation of the family of the students. Likewise, we heard to Antigua and Barbuda when they talked about the distribution of electronic devices. In our case, we produce the so-called canaimas. I remember that by then you were the ministry of the area, and we donated 30,000 tablets to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I also remember the first minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines making agreements with large telecommunication agreements in order to provide free internet. And you can see how when you went to St. Vincent, you can see the boys and the girls outside taking notes and doing homeworks with the free Wi-Fi connection to the internet or in their schools. So electronic devices to improve distant learning, that was mentioned by Antigua and Barbuda. I understand that is another challenge. We are still thinking on a traditional education, and I believe that there has to be emphasis on other areas. We cannot continue having so many homework and those type of things. This also implies the development of new tools, not only new technologies, but new tools, the training of teachers as well, as Sanket and Nevis mentioned. The professor also has the role and the need to adapt his or her methods to tools that are completely new. So how can we finance that? St. Vincent and the Grenadines spoke about the topics of access to internet. I know that there's a condition. He mentioned the topic of the volcano. And we always suffer when we see that the volcano doesn't stop erupting, and thank God nothing that has happened, but we are always watching over that situation. Grenada also talked about the limitation of devices, lack of connectivity, which makes populations vulnerable, especially those populations that are far away. And lastly, we heard to the representatives of Dominica. Now, as BANALBA, and after listening to all of the presentations, then we understand that there's a need for the finance of electronic devices, finance for the use of internet, training of professors, online courses, new tools and different tools. So what we propose, Mr. Secretary, for you to convey it whenever it is convenient, I would like to inform that the bank will take note of all of these necessities, and we will try to provide a new proposal. And in the upcoming days, we might be able to disseminate this. We were talking about virtual libraries, about the fact of uploading texts that might be free, but that we can upload on one same platform. We might finance language courses online, English and Spanish language courses online. This is something that Venezuela was doing, by the way, with the IBCCs, the Venezuelan Institutes of Cooperation of Culture, which are located in each one of the islands of the Caribbean. So we could relaunch that. This could be part of an improvement regarding new tools that will lead to an online education scheme. And well, I propose the language teaching, the online language teaching. Thank you very much. And I greet you all once again, and we will be at your service through the secretary. in order to be specific on all the topics that we spoke about today. Thank you very much to the president of our bank, Raul Licausi, for a summary, for such a good summary, which exemplifies in a very clear manner the importance of this meeting with specific proposals, with successful experiences, confronting so many large challenges. As you know, we have worked jointly with the acts of this meeting. So next, I'm going to read not the whole record, not the whole act, but I will read the most important aspects to submit them to your consideration. But within the framework of what the president of the bank mentioned, I can also say that this is a unique step that has to be translated into specific actions. There has to be one specific and clear action plan. And I am certain that we are going to have many more meetings in order to dwell on that. Next, I will read some of the most important aspects derived from this meeting. The ministers of education and higher education of the member states of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, of the People's Trade Agreement, ALBA-TCP, first express our concern on the social, human, and economical crisis provoked by the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected all the countries, the educational systems, communities, and families, in particular the most vulnerable ones, which have endangered education. We commend, or we urge to make joint efforts to confront the different scenarios of the COVID-19. It will be necessary to exchange experience and to socialize the good practices with the learning methods and with the different ways to achieve equity for the access of a good quality higher education. The higher education institutions of the member states of ALBA must be inserted in the process of digital transformation that the world is going through and must incorporate new models and new pedagogical trends for the development of the distant learning modality. We ratify that education constitutes a human right, and we support a good quality education as a key factor for the response and recovery before the global epidemiological problem. We have diversified the working modalities for guiding professors, students, and their families by encouraging the development of aptitudes, social welfare, and emotional welfare in order to achieve an equitative and a sustainable project. We recognize the work of the professor. We urge them to incorporate competencies that will allow them to fulfill the demands of the epidemiology, with the special emphasis on the digital competencies and pedagogical competencies. We agree on exchanging experiences and good practices for the consecution of the teaching and learning process, which involve the use of information technology and communication technology and the development of teleeducation as mechanisms for training during the COVID-19 pandemic in order to strengthen all those tools that will allow us to increase the distant learning quality and to massify access to the same. In that sense, Venezuela puts at your service the program Every Family is a School as part of the policies developed in the basic education subsystem during the quarantine for students to have access to a free and equal education of all students. We recognize the need of designing an educational portal of ALBA-TCP that will allow the communication, exchange of information, and coordination of actions between the member states in order to apply agreements and establish new specific plans that will allow to fulfill the same, understanding the health situation that we currently have. We celebrate the achievements, the educational achievements that several countries have reached amidst the COVID-19, especially Venezuela, in Cuba with the implementation of various plans in spite of the economic war and the unilateral coercive measures that have been applied by the United States of America against the Latin American country amidst the severe worldwide contingency. We promote the development of projects and initiatives within the project Grand National ALBA Education to implement the educational model and keep joint processes for international cooperation so as to secure these spaces and avoid any type of measure that will limit or restrict the mobility of resources and prevent the enjoyment of the human resources of our people. We exhort the state members to make progress in the consolidation of the Grand National Project of Education, so as to guarantee the whole population the right to a good quality education through the national units with the implementation of the 2021 action plan that includes the following activities: to designate and reactivate the new management and working groups that are related to the Grand National Project that has to do with Education ALBA, to carry out the rectors meeting of ALBA in order to have a joint, or to take a joint position to the select meeting of rectors, to drive the network UNI-ALBA with an action plan for university education ALBA-TCP that is common for all, to promote the realization of virtual and in-person meetings of the countries of the ALBA amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the development of sub-regional publications, amongst other actions that will allow to document the responses of the member states of this integration scheme amidst this severe worldwide contingency. Finally, we recognize, we acknowledge that we can only confront this worldwide crisis through international solidarity, through multilateral cooperation, and through the unity of our peoples. February 22, 2021. Dear friends, I submit to your consideration the approval of the act that I have just read, with the considerations that the president of the Banco de ALBA mentioned. So I submit to your consideration the act. I see that there are no objections. Therefore, we approve the act of the Ministers of Education of ALBA-TCP, February 22, 2021. Thank you very much to all of you for your participation.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego. Hallaya.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Okay, goodbye.